Yo, what's up, everybody? Thanks for checking out the podcast. This is your host, Dan Giffen. Wanted to let you know before today's podcast, if you do not yet own Ableton 10 Suite or Standard, I can hook you up. I'm an official reseller and can give you special discount pricing because there's a lot of us out there that are starving artists, and why not save money? So I can't say exactly how much I can on the podcast, but if you go to liveproducersonline.com/buyableton, that's liveproducersonline.com/buyableton, then you can message me, fill out that form, and I can hook you up with a special discount. And let me tell you, it's really good. So hit me up there if you're interested in owning the newest version of Ableton Live, Standard or Suite, and I'd be happy to hook you up. If you didn't already know, I wanted to just give a heads up. I really enjoy the project feedback that I've been doing with people through Live Producers Online. If you're not familiar with what that is, basically, if you've ever spent endless hours searching YouTube for the right answers, whether it's, getting that snare drum to sound right that you've worked on for far too long, or maybe it's, setting up your project for live performance. If you're a little more advanced and you need some help, then I've had a lot of experience doing that. I've been training and teaching Ableton for over 8 years now. So I really enjoy working with people on their music production, helping with mixing, live performance, anything you need help with. Even if I don't have the answer, I have a lot of connections with Ableton certified trainers in a huge wide variety of realms. If you did decide to join the membership with Live Producers and you join their pro plan, there's a free trial. I would love to continue to help be a resource and a support for you for your own projects or Ableton support or whatever you need. So I'm here for you guys, and thanks for checking out the podcast. The podcast, to be honest, takes a lot of time, just hitting people up and editing, and the project feedback is a way for helping me to pay my bills. So, and I enjoy helping people. If you need help or want guidance on your future projects or whatever you need help with, I encourage you to join the pro plan. And you also get access to all the webinar replays with certified trainers and producers that I have had. You can also access all the downloads. So these are sample packs and fully produced Ableton projects, and you'll find devices and fun hacks that I have found really valuable and useful on the site. So join the membership. Love to see you on the other side. Consider joining the pro plan, and I would be glad to help you with whatever you need help with along the way. That's enough about that. Let's talk more with our guest today, Tim, also known as Underbelly. So let's dive in. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Ableton Music Producer Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Giffen. We have somebody that I've been wanting on the podcast for a while now. His name is Tim. He goes by the name Underbelly for his artist name. He's a producer and an educator. He runs the YouTube channel and the website You Suck at Producing, which is awesome. Go check that out later. He's built an awesome community around giving people feedback on their tracks, producing, and he teaches music production using Ableton Live. He's one of the Ableton homies, which is why I'm excited to have him on this podcast as well. He makes great video tutorials on YouTube. He's done tutorial releases with DJ Tech Tools, Earmark, Pyramid, and he's collaborated with some of my personal favorite artists, including Tchami and N Krates and Giraffage and Lido. Is it Lido or Lido? I feel like I'm always mispronouncing.
It's Lido.
Is it Lido? Okay, we'll go with Lido. But yeah, man, welcome, Tim, to the podcast. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, for sure. Well, actually, the first time we met was at Loop, and I ran into you in the line at the bathroom. And prior to that occasion, like 3 weeks before, one of my good friends, Ben, who works with my website, Live Producers Online, showed me a couple of your tutorials, and I was like, this guy's pretty funny. He's a good edutainer, as some may say. And then I saw your face, and I was like, I know that face. So who knows how many months later, like 5 or 6 months later, here you are.
Here I am.
Yeah. But cool, man. So for those listeners who don't know much about you, I just want to get to know you better as well myself. How did you get into the world of music production and teaching in Ableton, like going back in the day? Like, how did it start for you?
Well, my first introduction to music in general was when my parents started to make me play classical piano when I was 7. And then I guess when I was like 12, 13, I discovered DJ Shadow. I discovered his album Introducing, which I loved. And then I later found out was made entirely from samples from vinyl. And I got super obsessed with that record. I got, a small, cheap MPC 500. I got like
Nice.
a shitty ass turntable. Can I swear, by the way?
Yeah, it's fine. No
Okay,
worries.
cool.
Yeah, most of our
Um,
listeners are above the age of 18 anyway, so I think you're all
okay.
right.
And then I started collecting records from local record stores and sampling them and trying to make my own kind of, what is now known as, lo-fi chill hop beats. But back in the
Yeah.
day was just hip hop, old school hip hop, I guess. Um, and then after about a year of doing that, I discovered Ableton Live, and that was, a game changer for me. And I guess around like 3 years after that, I just decided to upload my first YouTube video, the first You Suck at Producing video. It was called Chopping Samples. And to be
Nice.
completely honest, I completely ripped off the idea. I saw a channel called You Suck at Photoshop, and I thought that was really funny. And I thought, okay, why don't I just do the producing version of this?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did. And, a few years
Happily ever
later,
after.
here we are.
Yeah. Well, it worked out. Thank you, Mr. Photoshop person.
Yeah, thank you.
That's great. Well, yeah, man. I mean, you got a pretty solid following, and I love your videos on YouTube, like I was saying earlier. Um, I kind of want to spend a little bit of time dissecting a little bit of your process in producing. I know you give a lot of people feedback on their own tracks. I was listening to a podcast as we were mentioning before we hit the record button that you give people feedback, and I was listening to your episode with Brian Funk on his podcast, which is the music production podcast, and uh, he was one of the things you guys were talking about is you giving people feedback through Discord and how you kind of started that and doing live streaming and you're taking people's songs, giving feedback on them, or like talk about that process. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, shout out to Afro DJ Mac, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing educator,
Good
does
dude.
dope instruments and sample packs, great podcast as well. Super nice
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know exactly how that started, but yeah, I started doing live streams and people would submit their tracks and I would just roast them. And out of that sort of emerged the Discord, which just recently surpassed like some crazy amount, like 6,000 members.
Yeah.
And a big part of that Discord, I guess the central part is, yeah, giving feedback and roasting each other.
Awesome.
And, it's a really, really awesome community, and people really do learn from one another. There is an etiquette of, roasting somebody else before you post. So somehow it's managed to not to just spamming, which I don't know how we pulled that off, but
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
many people sort of took it upon themselves to moderate the Discord. I barely touch it, to be honest.
That's nice.
Other people have once again taken it upon themselves to create the subcategories and moderate the channels,
That's
and it's
great.
just turned into like a really, really robust and awesome community. And I feel like it's sort of its own thing now. I barely touch it.
It's
But
cool.
yeah, as far as giving feedback and stuff, yeah, that's something that I do regularly on the live streams and in my one-on-one lessons as well. And yeah, it's definitely a
Mhm.
big part of what I do.
Yeah. So you said that you started out just sampling and playing with the whole vinyl thing. And
Mhm.
talk about your process for sampling. I mean, obviously, Ableton has a lot of fun, shiny toys for being able to capture samples and manipulate them and do cool things, which we can talk about later. But as far as your process for sampling, like what does that look like now versus what it did before? Just curious.
What it did before was, I mean, it just was a lot of time spent listening to records and just hoping to come across something usable. In high school, my senior year, I did a beat every day for a year and uploaded it. And those were all sample based. And that was just either me finding records or downloading old stuff from the internet. and just combing through stuff and trying to find something that I could loop or chop up
Were these
using.
like 16 bar loops or just like a little section or fully produced tracks?
These were no, these were like a minute long, minute and a half long, maybe. Yeah, they were like 4 or 8 or 16 bar loops, basically. So
Okay,
they were all
nice.
very kind of rudimentary ideas, but it definitely helped me sort of develop a workflow quickly because I had to post something every day.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, one thing that I sort of started to run into with the sampling is that, it was limiting, right? Because you can only do what you found. And it would also take a lot of time to find usable material. So
Mhm.
slowly but surely, I started incorporating, my own instrumentation. Say I take the sample and I play my own bass line underneath it, or add chords, or a quick melody, and then it sort of switched away from using samples almost entirely and just doing my own playing out my own instruments with MIDI and stuff.
Mhm.
And now my approach to sampling is I just sort of sample myself. So I create an interesting patch in operator or serum, or sometimes it's just me messing around with plugins and basically recording the output of that, resampling it, and then chopping it up and arranging it on the timeline.
Nice.
So that's sort of my sampling workflow now. Um, and yeah, that's
Yeah.
sort of kind of what allows me to create interesting sounds and arrange them on the timeline.
I have a similar workflow with my outboard gear is I'll have the external instrument and on a track and then I'll just have like resampling going and I'll
Hmm.
just like print it to audio with some weird effects also on the insert of that external instrument track and just getting weird with it. And
Exactly.
yeah, and like one thing I love about you is you talk a lot about like the psychology behind producing music. Um, one of the things I heard you say in that podcast with Afro DJ Mac is like laughing at yourself is like the best medicine, and being able to like have fun with the production process and not overthink all the tools and everything along the way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's something liberating to just be like, "Yo, I suck at producing, and let's just have fun with it." There's a certain humbleness that comes
Yeah.
with that, and a sort of allowing yourself to be a little less precious about everything, and not get hung up on stuff. One thing that I notice a lot of my students is and myself is that it's so easy with the kind of plethora of tools that we have at our disposal to, just completely get lost in the sauce and kind of just not write anything at all, instead of taking time to just tweak parameters on one synth, or scrolling through, I don't know, 10,000 kicks to find the perfect one or whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah, generally speaking, I found those to be the main hurdles of actually getting stuff done. So being able to sort of work quickly and try to avoid the many pitfalls of getting lost and sidetracked and starting to mix too early or arrange too early or spend way too much time finding the perfect sample. All
Hmm.
that stuff is, I found to be sort of detrimental to my workflow. And I found that working quickly and with as many kind of roadblocks taken out of the way as possible
Hmm.
is, my key to finishing tracks. And that's sort of the workflow I tried to impart to my students as well.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some like more specific tips? Like if
Mm.
we could dive into what you just said, like on a detailed level of like finishing tracks, like what are some specific things you do consistently to make sure you actually finish a track and do it well?
Sure. Well, big thing is I've noticed that a lot of people disregard the session view in Ableton entirely. They
Hmm.
don't use it at all. They don't know how to use it or why,
Hmm.
which I totally get because it's something unique to Ableton. No other DAW really has it. So if you're coming from, I don't know, Logic, or Reason, or even Fruity Loops or something like that, it's just completely alien to them.
Yep.
But I find that it's extremely useful as a place to start drafting out your ideas before
Yeah.
necessarily committing to an arrangement. I find that a very common pitfall is that people start arranging way too early. They have, 1, 4, or 8 bar loop, and they expect that to sort of sustain the full length of a 3.5 minute song, and it pretty much never can do that.
Yeah.
There's some ideas that are so good that they can sustain that amount of time, but for most instrumental music, it's unlikely. So
Yeah.
what I found is starting in the session view first, and the workflow that I put most of my students through and myself through is starting in the session view and creating 4 different drum clips first, all at different energy levels. So a drum clip
Mm.
for your intro, a drum clip for your verse or build up section, a drum clip for your chorus, and a drum clip for your outro or breakdown. And by the way, this is a technique that I've learned from Matt Donner at Pyramind. He's an
Okay.
incredible teacher. He's the guy who sort of pioneered this sort of workflow, and I've taken a lot from him. So shout out Matt Donner.
Yeah.
But basically, the workflow is this. One thing that makes music engaging, especially over a longer track length, is the change in energy level over time. If the energy level doesn't change, well, we have ourselves an ambient piece, which isn't necessarily the greatest if you want to engage your audience and
Mm.
have the music be at the forefront of their attention at all times. So
Yeah.
it's really the change in energy that makes music dynamic and interesting for me.
Yeah.
And having the 4 different drum clips at the very beginning, first off, allows you to escape the 8-bar loop hellhole that many people find themselves in. And
Hmm.
then also have these changes in energy built in so that these 4 different drum clips can serve as jumping off points for different sections of our song. So once
Yeah.
you've written the clips, you can, say, write an accompanying chord progression for your intro drum clip, a different one for your B section, let's say. And then after you've done that across, I don't know, let's say drums, bass, chords, and melody, then once you have all those parts working in the session view, you can actually go ahead and just record yourself triggering the different scenes in the session view and sort of lay
Hmm.
out a preliminary arrangement in the arrangement view.
Yeah.
So I like to put off the arrangement process for as long as possible because I really want to make sure that I've thrown up everything creatively against the wall and just sort of see what sticks. And the arrangement process is really just a matter of organizing those ideas and sort of whittling it down to the cream of the crop there.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's a
and
solid
then,
workflow, man.
yeah.
I learned a very similar process when I went to Dubspot. Did you ever hear that school in New York
Mhm.
City? Rest in peace, Dubspot. Back in the day.
Yeah, I heard
Yeah.
they folded.
Oh, dude, there's yeah. But anyway, I went there almost 8 years ago, and I took the Ableton program, and they had the exact like literally day one. It was all right. Here's session view. This is going to confuse the hell out of you, and we're going to dive into this first because of A, B, C, and D, and that's basically what you just spelled out. Was let's create ideas. Let's do a brain dump of clips in session view on different tracks and start to organize them in scenes, and then get those little idea boosters and just copy and paste them over or play them out into arrangement view. And
Hmm.
that same thing I tell a lot of my students is like, if you understand session view really well, arrangement view is stupid easy. It'll take you like 5 seconds, especially if you come from another DAW. But yeah, no, that's great. I love that. And I'm a drummer, so starting off with drum clips is like my bread and butter. So I'm happy to hear you say that. Unless you're making like spa music, where it's just like ambient, literally just one omnisphere patch for like seven
Right.
hours, and you're just automating the sound. Yeah,
Right. I mean, in that case, you could just I don't give a shit. Just jump straight into the arrangement view and just record that.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah. Another big reason that I start with drums is, like I said, I'm all about the change in energy, and generally speaking, it's the drums that really drive the energy of a track throughout
Hmm.
different sections.
Hmm.
And also drums, more than anything, drums and BPM determine the genre or style of music that you're going to be in for the rest of the track.
Sure, absolutely.
So it's
Yeah.
it's just a huge, huge thing to sort of lay that foundation down from the
Hmm.
get-go.
Hmm.
And that's generally speaking why I like to start in them. But really the approach, you can start it with any sound. The key is to have those different clips at different energy levels so that once again we can sort of break out of the 4 or 8 bar or 16-bar loop hole that most people find themselves in
Yeah,
the arrangement view.
yeah.
Uh, so Yeah.
For sure. Well, I know that you, speaking of samples and music production and workflow and sounds, I know that you use Splice, and
Hmm.
I'm a huge fan of Splice as well. Finding different sounds and being able to grab a drum clip out of there, especially when you hit like a roadblock. Do you have any specific go-tos? Say like you got these ideas, you got these clips bouncing around in session view. If you hit like a roadblock and you're like, no, that sounds like shit. That sounds like shit, and you just kind of feel stuck. What do you typically do at that point?
Um, that's a good question. If I feel like I've just been completely exhausted, the creative dump, I'll switch over to the arrangement view or whatever. And if I feel
Mhm.
stuck in the arrangement view, I'll switch back into the session view
Mhm.
because there's such two different ways of thinking about the music. It's like you're looking at it, you're looking at the cube or whatever, the rectangle from one angle, and then you're kind of shifting that when you're
Yeah.
going into the other view. That usually helps reset my brain and sort of get me thinking about the track in a different way. So if I feel like I can't add anything in the particular view that I'm in, then I'll switch over to the other one. Another option that I like to do is actually break it down. So really, I find that when I feel unable to add anything, or I feel stuck, it's probably because I have too much shit going on already. So then that's where I sort of strip away and really kind
Yeah.
of take it back to the bare bones. Okay, let's say I have chords and drums and I just can't come up with, anything else. I usually take out the chords, let's say, and just write another progression for a B
Okay.
section or whatever. So I find breaking stuff down, stripping away to the kind of the barest minimum parts is a great way to kind of keep going after you get stuck.
Yeah.
And if all else fails, just take a break, or all else
Yeah.
fails, just put an effect on the master, just a crazy ass effect, like I don't know, like a grain delay or a frequency shifter or whatever, and just
Just get
resample that.
weird. Just get
Yeah,
as
and just
weird
get
as you possibly can.
exactly, yeah, just get as weird as you possibly can. And
Yeah.
even though mostly it's going to sound completely wrong,
Sure.
sometimes when something is obviously wrong, it'll just kind of clue you into what is
Yeah.
obviously right.
Yeah, for sure, dude. That's what I would call the happy accident of
Hmm.
production. That happened to me yesterday. I was kind of hitting a wall and I just started experimenting. I accidentally dragged a drum bus on top of one of my pads and it just made it sound crazy fat. And I was like, oh, that's the lead now. That sounds really
Hmm.
good. Like this kind of happened. That's the beautiful thing about Ableton is that you can just get really weird and it's fun
Yep.
for sure. Um, I know that you also produce a lot of your own music, obviously, and under the name Underbelly. I wanted to give a shout out to, I think it was like 2 months ago, you released a series of tracks called Cavern.
So that
Uh,
was just a single, and that came out like over a year ago.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
two
I
months
saw,
ago, I released a series of tracks. Maybe it was more than 2 months ago. It's probably a couple months ago. I released 10 tracks for YouTube.
right.
Uh,
That's what I was
me
thinking of.
and me and my friend Ty did a couple tracks together. And yeah, they're for YouTube's audio library. So they're free of charge, they're royalty free. Anybody can use them for whatever purpose they want.
Nice.
And out of that, I sort of did a couple of remix contests to sort of promote those tracks and also kind of, you know, shine a light to talent in the community and sort of, get the Discord together, working on one project. And that's been really, really awesome so far. I definitely got to do another one of those soon.
Yeah,
But
you definitely should, man. I was
yeah,
listening to it this morning as I was brushing my teeth, and I was like, "Man, this is hot. There's some really good tracks in here."
thank you.
It's on SoundCloud. I encourage all the listeners to go check it out. The Tracks for YouTube Volume 1 is what I was
Hmm.
listening to. I think that's what you're talking about. But the Curb Stomp, that was one of my favorites. I'm really into that, like, chill hop, kinda like modern lo-fi type of vibe,
Hmm.
and it resonated with me. It's more of the stuff I've been producing lately too. It's
Thank you,
good
man.
stuff. Yeah. As far as, like, finding your sound as a producer? I've listened to a couple different of your tracks, and I would say that several of them could cross boundaries into different genres. But you still manage somehow to kind of have your own sound, which I think is really hard for a lot of producers to do. Um, like as far as I'm sure you've worked with, I mean, you've worked with a lot of people, right? Producing and teaching. What would you say to somebody who came to you and was like, "Yo, Tim, I'm having a hard time finding my sound as a producer." And I think from a marketing standpoint, from an artist standpoint, that's a really important thing to have at some point if you want to develop your career as an artist and have your own image. Like, what would you say to somebody like that?
Well, thank you for saying that. It feels like I've quote unquote have a sound, because I don't feel that way at all. I feel like I'm so all over the place.
Yeah,
And that's part of the reason
me
why I
too.
haven't put out an EP or an album in quite some time, other than the YouTube thing. I mean, the YouTube thing is just completely all over the place in terms of genre and sound and
Mhm.
approach. Um, so I'm flattered that you would say that. I don't think I found it yet. You know, with the exception of very, very recently, like I made a
Mhm.
track very recently that is what I feel to be the closest thing to quote unquote my sound that I've hit in a very long time. So that's sort of like my
Yeah,
benchmark. And I sort of want to create an EP or an album around that.
cool.
Hopefully, if I
Yeah.
don't, fuck up and just go in a complete direction, different direction again.
Yeah.
But as far as my advice to other people who are looking for that, I would say limit the library of sounds that you are using. Like create a folder for yourself of your top 5 favorite kicks, snares, hi-hats, basses, leads, etc. Like really, really get organized and spend a lot of time curating that library of sounds for yourself for a couple of reasons. It'll make making better music faster a lot easier because your sounds will all be ready to go. You'll be wasting zero time scrolling through presets or sample packs. Everything will just be at your fingertips all the time. Uh, so that's one big thing. And then the other thing is you can often tell a producer's signature by the sounds that they come back to and use again and again.
Mhm.
And especially with drums and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And especially in EDM, like I think it's really, really important to have like that one patch or that one bass sound or that one
Mhm.
snare that really sort of is your sonic signature.
Yeah.
I would say drastically limit the number of sounds that you have at your disposal and just try to find as many interesting combinations of those sounds as possible.
Yeah.
That would be my advice for finding a signature sound. Basically, limit yourself, um,
Yeah.
and I think I think that will help. I mean, another way would be to sort of comb through your old projects and be like, okay, what am I noticing myself coming back to again and again? What sounds am I using, subconsciously just over and over again? And then that sort of can clue you in as to what your library needs.
Yeah, that's
Oh
really
yeah.
good advice, man. I would have said very similar things, and I'm extremely guilty of finding all the new shiny toys in Splice or new presets of plugins that I use over and over, and then just doing something new for every track, which I
Hmm.
think has, for me personally, caused me to take a longer period of time to actually find my sound because of doing that. But that's a good advice. Yeah, that's absolutely good advice. And I think not just for finding your own sound of, getting that library together of your own limited samples to get that sound. I think that's also really helpful for when you collaborate with other people too, right? So like if you have somebody else in the studio, you already have that go-to folder of sounds that sound good, and you can just pull that out on the fly. You said you collaborate with other artists. I'm sure having a solid, organized, beautiful color folder of beautiful toys that you can pull out in the moment when you're collaborating with somebody in the studio or wherever probably goes a long way, right?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, to be honest, I really only collaborate with one person nowadays, who's
Oh,
my best friend, Ty, who just, I mean, he lives like 15 minutes away. So I like just drive over to his house and we just work on music most nights. and that's
Yeah.
really honestly the only person that I've found to create a solid collaborative
Yeah.
relationship ever.
Is
Like
that because everybody else sucks at producing, right? That's why.
I wouldn't go that far.
I'm just kidding.
I would, I mean, I've done, maybe like one or two collaborations with people over the internet. I did a track with a producer named Arbor or something like that.
Mhm.
We did one for Chill Hop.
Nice.
So that was interesting, but to be honest, I don't really quite understand how people can collaborate over the internet effectively because I just find that in the studio, in person, it's just so much more immediate.
Yeah.
And the real reason why I've been able to work with Ty so well is first off, we just are really, really good friends. We've been friends for years and years before we started making music together. And it took a really, really long time for us to find a way to make music together that was sort of uh, us equally contributing.
Yeah.
Um, which another is another very, very rare thing,
Yeah.
so like the music that we make together feels equal parts both of us and also something that neither of us could create on our own. So I
Mhm.
think that's sort of like the sweet spot for a good collaborative relationship.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the way we work is I usually present an idea. It could be like a 4, 8, 16 bar loop, or a couple sounds, even just to kind of get us started, and he sort of takes it from there in a place where I would have never imagined. So with that, I mean, yeah, it definitely helps to have sounds ready to go for that. Yeah, I've definitely. I mean, sometimes we spend a good amount of time on sound design while we're working, but for the most part, most of the sounds should come together pretty quickly, or be ready to go already, so that kind of when we're working together, it's super quick. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate in a lot of ways. Is like being able to be in person in the moment with somebody and trusting their advice and opinion on something.
Hmm.
I feel like goes a really long way. And having that vibe, like, I feel like collaborating with somebody who like has the strength to do something that maybe you're not as good at, like is
Hmm.
somebody you can really build off of and super helpful. For me, like rhythm and drums and mixing and mastering and sound design is kind of my baby. And then, somebody else who's more accomplished on piano or like guitar or whatever, they can kind of really shine that light in my weakness. So I've been, collaborating with more people in that area recently. And that, yeah, it goes, I find that in the past, and maybe you had a similar experience, but when you try to collaborate with somebody remotely online and you're just sending projects back and forth, like I'll get it back. And then like I'm afraid I'm going to like hurt their feelings because I'm deleting like tons of shit. And I'm like, no,
Right.
that's bad. That's real bad. And then you send it back to them. And they're like, what the hell, man? Like I
Yeah.
spent hours on that one 4-bar loop. You're like, yeah, but it sucks. I'm sorry. It's just bad.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, kudos to anybody who can make that work. I know a lot of people do, but I'm just, you know, I just don't know how to really make that work for myself.
Yeah.
Perhaps, one day I'll find my dream online producer buddy, and
Hmm.
we can make it happen remotely. Or maybe I can find a way to work with Ty remotely.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, for now, I find that the in-person thing, and also I like what you said about playing to the other person's strengths and versus your weaknesses. Or for example, Ty is an accomplished, excellent guitar player, excellent percussionist as well. Um, I have no idea how to play guitar or do any sort of live drumming, anything like that. And also, he comes from a non kind of electronic music background. He comes from like a more rock centered
Mm,
background,
interesting.
which I think is really, really helpful. Because if we were both coming at it from the same place, like both
Yeah.
coming at it from like hip hop,
Yeah.
kind of, which is where I'm mostly from about, then I don't think it would be nearly as successful because both of our ideas about what the music should be would be pretty
Mhm.
much coming from the same place, and that just might not be nearly as interesting or exciting.
Mhm.
So you know, it's I'm very lucky to have that relationship.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, if you or anybody listening is familiar with Dave Pensato,
hmm
he has like the big show Pensato's Place.
yeah,
I actually attended the show at Gearfest that they did live last weekend in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which I still feel
nice.
like is a super random place for like a giant place called Gearfest where all these industry professionals are. It's like everybody gathers together in the middle of Fort Wayne, Indiana, which like they have a nice zoo apparently, but that's all the town really has going for them.
Wow.
Anyway, they were there, and one thing they talked about was collaborating is key with people that are in different genres than you, and kind of playing off what you said, like that's something I feel like I should be doing more because you find a whole different skill set and creativity outside of the realm that you're used to living in. I think it just opens up new doors. Kind of cool.
Totally, man.
That's one thing he was talking heavy about during that show, which I thought was cool. Very respectable guy. I mean, he knows a lot about the industry. Um,
Yeah, one last thing I'll say. A lot of people think they have to go at it alone these days. It's very
mhm,
the sort of, what people picture now as success is being like your own solo DJ producer act who does everything on their own and is sort of, kind
mhm,
of, the master of his or her own destiny.
mhm,
And it's isolating, I think,
mhm.
to just be, alone in your room, just like, inches away from your Ableton screen, and it's just like a perfect reflection of yourself, and it's
It's
just
true.
it can drive you crazy for sure. So,
Oh yeah.
um, you know, I think being in a duo or a band or something like that, that's just super underrated nowadays. I
Yeah.
get that the technology allows us to sort of be completely independent, which
Mhm.
is awesome. But it is also sort of atomizing in a way. And plus, once you get on SoundCloud or whatever, sure, we're all on our own, but it seems like a lot of us are just making the same shit as everybody else is anyways. So why
It's
not
true.
just,
It's true.
team up and
Yeah.
have a little bit more fun while we're at it.
Oh, totally, man. Like, yeah, and I think like having somebody to bounce ideas off of is really
Yeah.
helpful. You know, like you hear the same thing over and over, and then you just kind of want to jump off, the second story roof because you don't even
hmm
know what's good or not anymore. Having somebody to give feedback that you really trust, I think, can go a really long way, whether they're actually collaborating on that track or not. Just being able to get somebody else's opinion about something pre-release, it's been helpful for me for sure. This is true.
Totally.
Yeah, and like, when you do a collab with somebody else, if you both are solo artists, I feel like that's gonna reach a broader audience. Like as far as
hmm
like boosting up those Spotify streams or whatever, that could be helpful too. Piggyback off of each other's following. It's a
Absolutely.
big thing these days. Yeah, for all of you Spotify lovers out there, I'm a huge fan as far as finding new people. That's one thing I started doing recently. I'm just like trolling Spotify for people who are not famous yet and just
hmm
being like, this guy's dope, and just hit him up on the Instagram, slide into his DMs, and just be like, yo, share his track. We should make something sometime. Most of the time, they never respond, but that's fine.
I was gonna say, how successful is that approach?
Not very, but I've had a lot of follow backs, so I guess that's helpful.
There you go, man.
Yeah. But yeah, man. So what's next for you? I mean, you talked about, the whole Underbelly thing of, releasing some more stuff in the near future. Like what's what's something we can expect from you as an artist or with your website and teaching? What's in development?
Yeah, so gonna try to have we're gonna try to have my own solo EP or album or whatever, hopefully done before the end of the year.
Cool.
And probably gonna do more tracks with Ty as well. We are actually doing more tracks. We're working on that as well as we speak.
Is that under the
Um,
name Underbelly or is this like a
no,
new
our group is called Brotherhood of Superstars.
okay.
And in addition to that, just doing more videos. Got one like a sort of a music theory video coming out soon, which is always really funny because producers are just terrified of music theory. Like anytime you just say that, the video numbers just go plummeting down.
Yeah, like,
You do
oh
like
no.
a serum video, everybody's all over that shit. But as soon as you mention the
It's
words
'cause it's
music and
easy.
theory together, it's just like, oh my gosh, like
Like,
hair
I
raise
actually have to learn something and work for this. I'm gonna have to
So
spend time learning this. It's gonna be hard.
right. So what I found is, I think it's really, really important, but nobody wants to learn it. So, I'm going to do something a little different for this one and just sort of dress it up in a way where it doesn't feel like,
Cool.
going through like a huge undertaking or whatever, because I feel like people are more scared of it than they should be. It's really not that hard.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's what I'm trying to work on, and then
Cool.
also I'm going to try and restructure some of my Patreon benefits and tiers, because I feel like I've sort of been neglecting that. And, a personal goal of mine would be to sort of shift closer to sort of getting more of my income off of that
Mhm.
and benefits in that realm, rather than to always have to teach one-on-one.
Mhm.
Because I mean, there's really something amazing about being able to teach one-on-one over the internet and work with people and watch them grow individually.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit tough to spend 6 hours, 7 hours a day looking at other people's Ableton screens and then
A lot of
having to look
time.
at your own. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that's sort of kind of another sort of businessy goal of mine.
Yeah. I feel you on that. It's, like, good to help people, but at the same time, you don't wanna neglect your own therapy, you
Right.
know? That's cool, man. Well, we'll include links in the show notes to this episode of all those happenings with, your SoundCloud and Patreon and um, other things that are going on and social pages. So everybody go to your phone or wherever you're listening now, check out the description and you'll see more links to Tim and Underbelly and You Suck at Producing and his YouTube channel. I definitely encourage you to go check out some tutorials he's been busting out. They're really good and entertaining.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, for sure, man. I appreciate you joining the podcast. I know we're running tight on time and I want to respect your time and go make some more awesome chill hop tracks. And I look forward to hearing more with this new collab that you have going on. One more time. What was the name of that for everybody listening?
It's called the Brotherhood of Superstars.
Brotherhood of Superstars. Everybody be
Hmm.
looking out for that. When you're walking up on stage getting a Grammy, we'll all look back and be like, remember when this collab was first starting right here. Be great. Cool, man. Well, take it easy. Thanks again for joining. Everybody check out the show notes and click those links. Stay tuned.
Thank you so much, man. It was a pleasure being on.
Yeah, for sure, man. We'll be in touch. Have a good week.
You too, man.
All
Peace.
right. Peace. This podcast is sponsored by liveproducersonline.com, a community of Ableton Live users connecting you to the pros to learn today's music production.